Looking at the English email on my phone, I took a deep breath, feeling so excited that I was almost on the verge of tears. Since being reborn, this is the happiest thing for me. My application for an overseas assignment has finally been approved. Soon, like my mom and dad, I'll become a war correspondent. I haven't told anyone about being reborn, and I even applied for the overseas assignment secretly, because I know Asher won't let me go. Asher is my childhood friend. Our families have been friends for generations. Since my parents passed away unfortunately at an early age, I grew up with him. Everyone knows I'm head over heels in love with him and assume I'm his fiancée, but Asher doesn't love me. He even ruined my future for the one he loves. Given a second chance at life, I no longer have such wishful thinking. I just want to get away from Asher. In this life, I want to live a life without him. After putting away my phone, I went to the hotel restroom to do a quick makeup touch-up. Today is Asher's birthday. I took the initiative and invited many friends and relatives for him. On this day in my previous life, I confessed my love to Asher in front of all the guests. I thought he liked me too and would naturally accept my confession, but Asher told me he had someone he loved and only saw me as a sister. The confession ceremony I had carefully prepared ended in failure. I became the laughingstock in everyone's eyes, but in this life, I won't do such stupid things anymore. Moreover, this is the last birthday I'll spend with Asher. Soon, we'll be far apart and never see each other again. When I arrived at the banquet hall, Asher seemed to have already guessed what I was going to do. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if he was trying to come up with words to reject me. The emotions in the depths of his eyes were obscure. Just as he was about to speak, I took a step ahead, raised my glass, and smiled at him. Asher, happy birthday. I hope you can find the right person to love soon. Asher and the other guests were all stunned. I tilted my head up, drained the glass of wine, picked up my bag, and turned to leave. After the party ended, Asher and his friend were smoking in the corridor. He leaned against the wall, his hands with distinct knuckles playing with a gold-embossed lighter. The flame flickered on and off. His friend laughed teasingly. With today's setup, I thought Scarlett was going to confess her love to you. Turns out it was a false alarm. Asher closed his eyes slightly, a faint smile on his lips. Don't make wild guesses about a girl's thoughts. I have no other feelings for Scarlett. I take care of her only because of the friendship between our families. His friend didn't believe it. You're just blind to your own feelings. Look at the way your girl looks at you. Do you think we're stupid? If you were really innocent, why did you go and warn that guy when someone confessed to Scarlett back then? And you even pretended to be her boyfriend. Asher fell silent. I didn't listen anymore and left the hotel without a backward glance. In my previous life, Asher was like this. His kindness to me had already crossed the line, but he just refused to admit it. Both of my parents were war correspondents. They unfortunately sacrificed one after another. I want to carry on their legacy. It's just that in my previous life, I didn't even get a chance to start. It ended before it even began. Fortunately, God took pity on me and gave me a chance to start over. After returning home, I looked at the date of my departure abroad and then at the desk calendar beside me. I took out a pen and silently marked the day of my departure. Coincidentally, that day was also my birthday. I think being able to inherit my parents' career is the best birthday gift for myself. While I was packing my luggage, there was a knock on my door. It was Asher. He was used to knocking twice and then entering, but this time, a young girl was following behind him. The girl was good-looking but seemed rather frail. What's more, her right eye was blind, and the eyeball had been removed. There was a touch of melancholy in her eyes. She was really pitiful. Scarlett, come here, Asher said to me. I didn't move. I just glanced at the two of them. The girl beside Asher was named Aurora. I had already given up showing my love to Asher, but I didn't expect Aurora to show up just like in my previous life. Scarlett, Asher frowned and called me again. Seeing my indifferent expression, Aurora lowered her eyes and said softly, Asher, it's okay. It's normal that Miss Scarlett doesn't like me at our first meeting. If she minds my presence, I can go back to the villa in the suburbs. I'm blind in one eye and can't go anywhere. It doesn't matter where I live. I don't have to live here. As she spoke, Her eyes were filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She was like a delicate flower, trying to be strong. Asher's brows furrowed even deeper, and his eyes looking at me held a bit of disappointment. Scarlet, Uncle, you can arrange whoever you want to live in the villa. You don't actually need to tell me. I said. You're the master of this house. My voice was flat, revealing no emotions, but to Asher's ears, it seemed full of thorns. He thought I was throwing a tantrum. Scarlet, you don't need to talk to me in this tone. I brought Aurora to meet you today because I want you to meet your future sister-in-law. Previously, I was ambushed, and Aurora stepped forward to take a knife from me, which injured her eye. If you still want to stay in this house comfortably, put away your spoiled girl attitude and don't cause trouble for Aurora. Asher swept me with a warning look. I wanted to say something, but in the end I remained silent. I actually don't blame him anymore. Feelings are something that can't be explained clearly. In my previous life, I was the one at fault. I had an extremely paranoid possessiveness towards Asher. From childhood to adulthood, I wanted him to only have eyes for me, and the only female companion by his side should be me. So over the years, he had no scandals. I drove away any girl who got close to him. There was only me by his side. So in my previous life, when he was going to marry Aurora, I had a breakdown. Does one really have to marry someone to repay a life-saving grace? I thought about it for a long, long time. I just couldn't figure it out. But now I've figured it out. I'm letting go of him and also letting go of myself. Aurora moved into the Asher family's residence. The master bedroom on the first floor used to be my room. But Aurora said her eyesight was poor and it was inconvenient for her to go upstairs, so she wanted to live on the first floor. I agreed indifferently. It was just a room anyway. I could give it to her. After all, I was leaving soon. I had already given Asher to her. How could I possibly argue with her over a room? However, since I had lived in the Asher family for almost 10 years, there were a lot of things in the room that I needed to pack up. Asher brought Aurora to visit her future room. He leaned against the doorframe, gave me a cold look, and then said, I've asked Ella to clean the guest room on the second floor. You can stay there for now. I didn't say anything. I just folded my clothes and put them in the suitcase. Seeing me being so obedient, Asher seemed a bit reluctant. He said, let me carry your suitcase downstairs. I took a deep breath, withdrew my gaze, and forced a smile. No need. It's not heavy. Scarlet, are you still angry with me? Asher asked coldly. Why would I be angry with you? I counter-asked. You have your own life. Now that you have someone you love, I should be happy for you, right? Asher's eyes darkened. His thin lips opened and closed, but no sound came out for a long time. When I was pulling the suitcase to leave, Aurora was not far outside the door. Her eyes looking at me were filled with a bit of sarcasm. Just like in my previous life, she pretended to be so innocent on the surface, but in fact, she targeted me everywhere and would start crying at the slightest disagreement. The tears of the weak are always easy to win sympathy. Miss Scarlet, I'm sorry to put you in this situation. If it weren't for my inconvenience, Asher wouldn't have done this. My hand tightened on the suitcase handle. When I tried to walk past her and leave, she suddenly grabbed my wrist, and I instinctively shook it off. Ah! Aurora deliberately stumbled and rolled down the stairs. A scream rang out, and the servants in the villa rushed over. Asher, help! Asher immediately ran out of the room in a panic. He pushed me out of the way, rushed over, and picked up Aurora by the waist. I stood there, stunned, my throat tightening. It wasn't me. Aurora huddled pitifully in Asher's arms. I thought I was going to die. Her eyes were completely red, and the fear in her eyes seemed genuine. Asher looked at me angrily. Scarlet, are you crazy? If something really happened to Aurora, you'd be suspected of murder. Do you know that? I bit my lower lip, filled with grievance, my nose tingling. I didn't do it. She suddenly grabbed my hand, and I just shook it off. Hearing this, Aurora said pitifully, It's my fault, Asher. Don't blame Miss Scarlet. It's because my eyes are bad and I couldn't see the way clearly that this happened. Aurora, you don't need to defend Scarlet anymore, Asher said coldly. I know what kind of temper she has. Over the years, she's driven away every woman who got close to me. I couldn't help but laugh, with tears in the corners of my eyes. So you don't believe me? Do you deserve my trust? He retorted. Yes, I don't. Only Aurora deserves it. You believe whatever she says. With that, I pulled my suitcase and was about to leave. But Asher asked the servants to stop me. He said, apologize. I looked back at Asher in disbelief. He repeated, Aurora has been wronged for no reason. You should apologize. What if I don't? I asked, my eyes filled with tears. I thought I could face this kind of situation calmly. But I overestimated myself. When all the past favoritism turned into sharp swords stabbing at me, it really hurt. You know what I can do, Asher said coldly. He looked at the servants behind me. The servants exchanged glances and were about to step forward to hold my shoulders. I let out a self-mocking sneer. I let go of the suitcase handle, bent down towards Aurora, and apologized. I was wrong about what happened today. I shouldn't have shaken off your hand when you grabbed me. I'm sorry for making you almost fall. Aurora was stunned for 2 seconds, and Asher's expression also became serious. After I stood up, I looked at Asher. Are you satisfied now? Asher's eyes were filled with complex emotions, but in the end, he said nothing. I pulled my suitcase and left the Asher family. When I walked out of the garden, I looked back at Asher's house. Asher and I had left countless beautiful memories here, but these memories would also stay here. I no longer had any nostalgia for my past with him. I didn't love Asher anymore. I wasn't surprised that Asher could find me. There was still a week until I went abroad. After leaving the villa, I went back to my own home. Asher stood outside the yard, the red glow of his cigarette flickering between his fingers, his brows furrowed tightly. I had just come back from work at the newspaper office and saw him. You're off work. I nodded and didn't say more. Suddenly, the surroundings fell into a deathly silence. He was waiting for me to say more, but I actually had nothing to say until his phone rang. It was Aurora's call. Asher didn't avoid me and answered it right away. Her weak sobs came from the other end. Asher, I had a nightmare. I'm so scared. Can you come back and accompany me? She asked cautiously. Asher subconsciously looked at me. By then, it was already dark. I lowered my eyes to look at the elongated shadow on the ground, my expression indifferent. After a long time, I heard him say, I'll be back right away. The call ended. Asher then tried to hold my hand. I frowned and dodged. His movement froze. When he looked at me, there was a bit of confusion in his eyes. He probably forgot. In the past, we were so close because I regarded him as the love of my life. You have a fiancé now. We shouldn't cross the line. I said indifferently. Asher sneered and retracted his hand, pretending to be calm as he put it in his pocket. I know you can't accept my relationship with Aurora all of a sudden. But it doesn't matter. I can wait until you can accept it before getting engaged to her. For now, just get used to each other. I didn't speak and remained silent. In the previous life, ever since Aurora appeared, Asher and I never had a day of talking properly. We would quarrel as soon as we met. He said I was unreasonable, arrogant, and willful. He also said I couldn't distinguish between family love and romantic love. He pushed me away step by step, but I was like a fortress, pressing forward. Even though I was stabbed all over by all the vicious words, everyone was trying to persuade me. Asher doesn't like you. Why don't you believe it? He likes Aurora. Every time I would cry and say, no, Asher loves me. On my 18th birthday, when he thought I was asleep, he secretly kissed me. He said he would marry me. I always believed that Asher was only going to marry Aurora to repay her for saving his life. Until one time, Aurora broke into my room without permission, deleted the news photos I had painstakingly taken, and formatted my computer and camera. The newspaper was going to finalize and print the issue at dawn, but I didn't hand in any photos, causing a major work accident and being criticized. My career as a journalist ended right then. No newspaper dared to hire me anymore. I never had the chance to fulfill my parents' unfulfilled life dreams. At that time, Asher protected Aurora, unconditionally defending, explaining, and making excuses for her. He said she was just curious and wanted to see my work, not deliberately trying to harm me, and asked me to be understanding. At that moment, I finally confirmed that Asher didn't love me. What are you thinking about? Asher's voice brought me back to reality. You should have had enough of your tantrums these days. Let's just forget about what happened last time. Scarlett, you're not a child anymore. With that, he opened the passenger side door and looked at me. I stood still, forcing an ugly smile. I suddenly wanted to ask Asher from the previous life. Why could he be so biased, unable to tell right from wrong, and let Aurora destroy my career and dreams? Even if he didn't love me, I was still his childhood friend. What you said the other day was right. Over the years, I've used petty tricks to drive away any woman who appeared around you. So for Aurora's safety, I won't go back. Asher frowned. Scarlett. You know I like you, right? I calmly interrupted Asher. His pupils suddenly constricted. Over the years, I never hid my love. As long as one wasn't blind, they could tell. I believe Asher knew it too. Scarlett, he looked at me with an embarrassed expression. Don't worry, it won't happen again in the future. I was naive before, mistaking family affection for love and making quite a few jokes. Now I can be considered to have cut my losses in time. I hope you can forgive me. With that, I smiled again, but Asher stood there like he'd lost his soul, looking dazed. As if my words just now were hard to understand. He opened his lips, about to speak. The phone in his pocket rang again. I in the quiet night, it was especially harsh, ringing one after another. He seemed not to have come to his senses yet. But I had already stepped back 2 steps and turned to leave. When Asher returned to the villa, Aurora was sitting in the living room waiting for him. She was thinly dressed. Having waited all night, her hands were already freezing cold. Why don't you go back to your room? Asher asked, frowning. Aurora pursed her lips and glanced at her phone with downcast eyes. I called you many times, but you didn't answer. I was worried about you. Aurora. Asher walked to the side of the sofa and sat down, looking straight at Aurora. There was no warmth in his eyes. Aurora nervously raised her head, having a bad feeling. Scarlett grew up with me. Over the years, she's always been by my side. Her temper was spoiled by me. When you decided to follow me back then, I already told you this. I owe you my life. You can ask me to pay it back in any way. But you must not touch Scarlett. As he spoke, Aurora's eyes instantly turned red. She looked at Asher wrongly. Asher, do you suspect that I hurt Miss Scarlett? Asher didn't say much. He only left one sentence. For Scarlett's safety, there are many surveillance cameras in the villa. Aurora stood there, stunned, and didn't react for a long time. She thought Asher had stood by her side that day and believed her. She didn't expect that her little tricks had long been seen through by Asher. After Asher went upstairs, he didn't return to his own room. Instead, he went to Scarlett's previous room. After Aurora moved in, everything in Scarlett's room had changed. Asher lit a cigarette, and his eyes inadvertently fell on the desk calendar in the gap of the desk. He bent down and picked it up. When he saw that December 3rd was circled with a black pen, he thought, this is Scarlett's birthday. I've been so busy with Aurora's affairs recently. How could I forget this? Asher rubbed the desk calendar with his fingertips. After a moment of silence, he put the desk calendar back in place. He told the butler, renovate the guest room on the 2nd floor again. Let Aurora live on the 2nd floor from now on. After cleaning this place up, let Scarlett come back to live. I'll go pick her up in a few days. Aurora happened to be returning to her room. Hearing this, her face instantly turned pale. There were 5 days left until I went abroad. My handover work was basically completed. But I didn't expect Aurora to come to the newspaper office to find me specifically. I hadn't seen her for just a few days, and she looked even more like a broken beauty. Is there something you want from me? I asked her after putting away the manuscript in my hand. Aurora looked down at me. The disgust in her eyes was completely exposed without reservation. She looked at me and said, Scarlett, Asher and I are about to get engaged. Can you stay away from Asher? Is being a mistress who gets involved in other people's relationships your family's way of teaching? My hand that was reaching for the pen paused. I raised my eyelids to look at the woman in front of me, a sneer on my lips. Miss Aurora, you'd better watch your mouth. Watch my mouth? You should also clean up your acts, Scarlet, don't think I don't know. Everyone knows you like Asher, you moved out of the Lee family now just to play hard to get. I'm telling you, Asher doesn't like you. He will never like you in this life. The person he loves is me. Aurora became more and more excited as she spoke. I couldn't help but laugh scornfully. In my previous life, I hardly ever got along with Aurora alone, but I knew she was not a good person. Like me, she would stop at nothing for the one she loved. The calculations in her eyes and the tricks she played were things I got tired of playing in my previous life, but at that time, I forgot. Only when you're about to lose something will you desperately try every means to hold on to it. In the previous life, with just a few words of provocation from her, even if I fought with her until I was black and blue, Asher remained unmoved. But in this life, I haven't done anything. Yet it made her so panicked. These days, Asher would send me messages from time to time. He told me that my room was still reserved for me. Exactly the same as it was, nothing had changed, just as it was when I left, and like before, he would order afternoon tea for me without fail. Do you think Asher loves me? No. I also know about the surveillance cameras in the villa. Given Asher's character, he wouldn't not investigate. But since he investigated and didn't react, it only means that he acquiesced in Aurora bullying me. The current changes are just because he's not used to my leaving. That's all. I smiled. I don't like him anymore, Aurora. Aurora was suddenly taken aback, and her originally excited emotions gradually calmed down. What did you say? I admit that Asher used to be very good. From childhood to adulthood, whenever I was wronged, he would stand up for me. He was afraid that I would cry and be unhappy. Besides my parents, he was the kindest person to me in the world. So it was only natural that I fell in love with him. But that day, when he saw me crying and still forced me to apologize to you, I stopped liking him. Aurora seemed a bit incredulous. Just because of this? I nodded. Just because of this. If the person I like is willing to let me cry and be wronged, then he's not the one worthy of my love. Before Aurora left, she asked me again. Is it true that no matter what Asher does, you won't like him anymore? I replied, yes. Even if he were to die for me, I wouldn't like him anymore. The night before I went abroad, just as I was about to board the plane, Asher sent me a message. I'll come pick you up later. I didn't reply. The other side showed typing for a long time, but there was no follow-up. When I was about to put away my phone, Asher's voice call popped up. His voice sounded a bit relaxed and cheerful. Scarlet, I'll come pick you up in a while. There might be some traffic jams. I didn't answer. He was indeed on the road. The honking sounds from the road came through. This time, the boarding announcement sounded again. The breathing on the other side clearly stopped. After being stunned for 2 seconds, he asked softly, Scarlet, are you at the airport? Yeah. Why are you at the airport? Are you going on a business trip? Why didn't you tell me? Did you forget that tomorrow is I interrupted Asher's words in a flat tone, and he fell silent. I added, I'm going to be a war photographer. The return date is uncertain. Thank you for taking care of me all these years. After being reborn, I thought about taking revenge on Asher, making him taste the pain of having his dreams shattered and his future ruined. But my life is so long. Why should I be limited to love, hate, and grudges? Asher was once wholeheartedly good to me. We're even now. So now, I neither love nor hate him. Why? Why is it so sudden? After a long time, he asked me. I didn't answer, and he continued, Scarlet, if this is because of Aurora, I can explain. I can ask her to leave. But you can't go. This job is too dangerous. His tone was urgent, and the car horn was also ear-piercing. Scarlet, I'm begging you. Don't go. I'll pick you up and take you home right away. No. This is my life's dream, and I must go. I smiled softly and then hung up the phone. After turning off the phone, the haze that had been pressing on my heart finally dissipated. Finally. Everything came to an end. Asher stared at the phone that had been hung up and kept dialing. Eventually, all he got was the cold mechanical voice. Scarlet had turned off her phone. At this moment, he was more sober than ever. Scarlett really didn't want him anymore. When he realized this fact, he lost control and punched the steering wheel, violently loosening his tie. His heart ached so much that it was hard to breathe, and gasping for air couldn't relieve the pain. Just as he was about to call his assistant to check Scarlett's flight, Aurora's call came in again. Her voice was thick with sobs, and she was pleading with him not to send her away. These days, he had thought a lot of things through. A life-saving grace didn't necessarily mean he had to marry the person who saved him. He could give Aurora enough money to ensure she lived a life without financial worries. He could give her whatever she wanted. Except his heart. He had never realized how much space Scarlett occupied in his heart. Until now, with Scarlett's departure, he understood that almost his whole heart belonged to her, that girl who would cry, laugh, and make a fuss in front of him. He always reminded Scarlett in an elder-like tone not to confuse love, but he himself had been in love for more than 10 years without even realizing it. At this moment, he couldn't wait to find Scarlett. He wanted to tell her that he loved her deeply. He had been wrong before and he wouldn't make the same mistake again, never again. After finding out Scarlett's flight, Asher immediately booked a ticket. Just as he was about to drive to the airport, he collided with a truck. He had a car accident and fell into a coma for a whole week. When he woke up, only Aurora was by his side. When Aurora met his gaze, she was uncharacteristically flustered. Asher's eyes suddenly turned cold, like a frigid pool. She stammered, "Asher, are you feeling okay anywhere?" Asher didn't say anything. He took his phone, unlocked it, and when he saw that the person at the top of his chat list had been out of touch since a week ago, a sarcastic smile tugged at his lips. His eyes became inexplicably empty. During his coma, he had a long dream. He dreamed that after Scarlett confessed to him, he brought Aurora home and said she was his lover. He dreamed that Scarlett kept arguing with him, saying she loved him and having battles of wits with Aurora. Then he saw Scarlett being fired from the newspaper office because of the loss of important work materials. In fact, Asher wasn't unaware of Scarlett's life's dream. He knew she wanted to be like her parents, but he couldn't bear it. The war zone was too dangerous. Asher would rather ruin her future and career than see her die on the front line. After losing her job, Scarlett locked herself in her room every day, staring blankly at the sky outside and crying for no apparent reason. Asher, due to his guilt, didn't dare to see Scarlett again. He was afraid that Scarlett would look at him with those cold eyes. He was afraid that he would no longer see even a trace of love in Scarlett's eyes. Later, Scarlett finally woke up and decided to fulfill her life's dream. But before she could reach the front line safely, the helicopter she was on crashed. Scarlett died on the way to the front line at the age of 25. Asher was devastated. He regretted it and didn't marry Aurora. Even if Aurora threatened to kill herself, he remained unmoved. He insisted on marrying Scarlett, even though everyone was scolding him, shameless. He forced his childhood friend to death and still wants to marry her, but Asher was unwavering. He held Scarlett's ashes, completed the wedding, and then committed suicide by jumping into the sea. 3 months later. When Asher found me, I was taken aback. I had just withdrawn from the front line, returned to the rear for supplies, and went to the hospital for a physical examination. By the way, as soon as I walked out of the hospital, I saw him. He had lost a lot of weight. His formerly well-fitting suit could no longer hang properly on his emaciated body. He forced a smile on his pale face. I frowned slightly and kept a distance from him. "How have you been, recently?" He greeted me awkwardly. I nodded. I had heard about Asher's situation. On the day I went abroad, he had a car accident. After waking up from the accident, he wanted to send Aurora back to her hometown and cancel their engagement. Aurora didn't agree and they had a very ugly fight. Asher still didn't back down. In a fit of anger, Aurora stole the Lee family's business secrets and sold them to 2 or 3 of his competitors. Overnight, he was attacked from both sides. The Lee family's stock was in turmoil, the capital chain was broken, and projects were suspended. It took him 3 months of non-stop work to barely stabilize the situation. Aurora was sued by him and sentenced to 10 years in prison. "When are you planning to go home?" he asked again, his tone cautious. I smiled. "I'm not going back." He was stunned. Why? Your home? You forget, I don't have a home anymore. After my parents died, Asher was the only family I had left. But later, Asher didn't want me either. So, whether in the previous life or this life, I have no home. Asher seemed to want to say something else. But I didn't listen anymore and turned to leave. Asher followed me all the way to the dormitory building. Suddenly, he asked me a question. Were you scared when the helicopter crashed? My steps paused slightly. He looked at my back, his voice tinged with a nasal tone. I just thought, why did my Scarlett suddenly stop liking me? I'm sorry, Scarlett. I was wrong. I thought I only regarded you as family and a sister, but actually, he choked up halfway through. Tears welled up between his fingers, and his shoulders trembled continuously. I was just so scared. I was afraid that if we started, there wouldn't be a good ending. I was afraid that in the end, we wouldn't even have any relationship. I thought Aurora's appearance would only break your thoughts about me. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. I'm sorry, really sorry. The more he spoke, the more pain he became. He slowly and cautiously approached me. When he tried to hold my hand, I dodged and turned back to look at Asher with calm eyes. It's okay. I don't care anymore. I already have a new life. Asher will have one sooner or later, but our lives will be parallel from now on, never intersecting again. Since I'm here, I've already put life and death aside. But you have parents, family, friends, and your own career. Asher, actually you don't love me that much. You just feel unwilling because you've lost me. But we have no future. Go back. The last glimmer of light in Asher's eyes was completely extinguished. Scarlett. He watched my departing back and burst into tears. Take good care of yourself. Don't end up like your parents. The wind in the Middle East was strong. Asher reached into his pocket to take out the cigarette box, his hands trembling as he tried to take out a cigarette and light it, but the lighter just wouldn't work no matter how many times he tried. The sand and wind blew into his eyes, causing him so much pain that tears streamed down uncontrollably. He thought, how could Scarlett endure such a strong wind? If he could have awakened earlier and been a bit braver back then, Scarlett wouldn't have come here and lived a day-by-day life filled with uncertainty. The war zone was far too dangerous, so Asher left soon. In the past, people used wild geese to send letters and fish to convey messages to Scarlett. But Asher's Scarlett had disappeared without a trace ever since. Afterward, Asher developed a habit of reading newspapers and watching the news. Even though Scarlett no longer replied to Asher's calls, emails, or messages, as if she had vanished from the world, but as long as he could see the name Scarlett still existing, he could then sleep soundly.